This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the week 3 live session for Color Theory. In attendance is Jennifer. Thanks, Jen, for being here. So this is what this week looks like. Today's a live session. You're going to post your work to the discussion by Thursday. You're going to provide a peer feedback on Friday. And then on Sunday, you're going to complete the identity package and color palette. So all in all, out of the 4 weeks of this class, this week is kind of the easiest, I would say. People have told me that. So hopefully it gives you a chance to catch your breath a bit. All right, so here's the logo. Let's talk about this. What's good? What's not working with this logo?
It's way too busy.
It is too busy. It's too complicated. It's got 3D type with a stroke around it and Chrome. The icon essentially is an illustration, full-blown illustration of a ship flying through the sky. Now, the idea of Full Sail when it first started was we overcome obstacles to take you to your dreams. So with that phrase in your head, the flying ship really kind of fits, right?
Yeah.
Overcoming the obstacles. I think an issue came up with this image and they decided to switch to an airplane. So here's the next iteration. Slightly better, maybe. This is from the 90s. Oh no, am I cutting out?
No. No, it was just a little slow.
Less three-dimensional, less gradient, less of a complex illustration. They switched to a plane because it considered to be more high-tech in a way. But still, we have some issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all wrapped up together in a lot of nonsense. This deco kind of shapes and borders and all this is still way too complicated. So then they went to this version. This is from the 2000s. And Drake has joined us. So this is a little better, right? What's wrong with this one?
The type, I feel like.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read, right?
Yeah.
Because the plane is right in the middle. So here we are today. You see the functionality here. The type is clear and legible. It's not 3D. It's not all this crazy illustrative stuff. The icon is separate. The scalability of this is really good. So it's working. You have to, as you get to this final logo stage, you're finalizing your logo, you got to think about, does it work a black background or dark background and a light background? And do I need a horizontal version and a vertical version? And those would be the lockups you'd want to have in general. Maybe you don't need all those, but this one, this horizontal version, I've only seen it on the website. It almost never gets used. I don't know, Matt, have you seen that around? Maybe not. The vertical one is the preferred one, clearly, and so they try to keep that going all the time for consistency. All right, so this is week 3, identity packages and color palette. Now, these two things go hand in hand, so they're really not two separate assignments. They're kind of like one thing. You're going to create an identity package, which is business card, letterhead, and envelope for your brand. This is Maria's and Zinnia T, and I'm going to go through kind of what you need to do to create this. What I recommend is that you design your stuff and play with color as much as you want. And when you find something that you really like, then you're going to document your color palette. And that's essentially the assignment. We talk about identity, and that's a traditional identity package for graphic designers, but identity can mean so many things. It can be the uniforms. It could be the way they answer the phone. It could be banners and outside, all the stuff So when you go to Best Buy, that blue and yellow signals that somebody works there. You get this consistency. It's a pretty basic color palette, but it's like everywhere there. So what that does, builds this consistency, makes you feel like, oh, it's okay to take out my credit. Identity packages, they're like, the branding is like the idea, and the identity is how it gets expressed, how it gets manifest so that people see it. Here's brand. This is Bobby's Burger Palace, and this was done by Pentagram. You can see the logo looks like a burger, right? 2 buns, lettuce, and meat because of that color palette. They carry that color to the interior decor, the signage, all the packaging, the business card. So it starts to flow into one consistent brand. Go back to the last slide, Drake. Is that what you were looking for? You're welcome. Here's a brand. So this company, here's a billboard, a printed piece, a presentation display, some banners and signage, but it all looks like it goes together, right?
Yeah,
Andrew's
because of the
joined us.
colors.
So what makes it look, yeah, what makes it feel like it goes together?
I feel like the colors bring it together.
Yeah, definitely the colors do. In fact, if you go a little deeper, they're using gradients very consistently. So even though the shapes are different in different pieces, the gradient is the same. They're also using this knockout white graphics. So there's a percentage sign here, this thing here, these arrows. They're different symbols, but they're used the same way. So different applications, but the same kind of look. It's what I call a family resemblance. Like if you think of a brother and sister, they're different genders, different ages, but somehow they look like they go together. That's what you're aiming for. Spoke Trade Company, so a different take on it. They have a very muted color palette, but again, consistency, so it's used everywhere. They have this cream paper, natural packaging, so all this sort of nature and muted color sort of all start to flow together. They have some graphic elements like this little wax seal, and the typography certainly ties it together as well. So how do you create a great brand identity? Think of your brand like a person, a personality. It's like, what would they wear? What do they look like? What kind of clothes? In fact, if I go to a client's office, I'm going to do some branding. I go to their office, I look at the artwork they have, I look at the knickknacks, all the stuff they have on the wall. What is their office decor like? That's going to tell me something about what their personality is, what their taste is like. So it all fits. I point out, Martha Stewart went to jail of these 4 men, 3 men, 1 woman. And she overcame that pretty quickly and is a woman in charge of a $1 billion media company. And she did it through incredible consistency. She's just always like your neighbor who makes cupcakes. But she's a lot more than that, obviously. So as you go forward, you're going to explore areas for visuals, different types of visuals to use in your identity package. So first can be nature. So are there natural elements? Is your product natural? Are there images from nature that you can add to the pieces to sort of give it more branding? Texture, all kinds of textures are helpful. You know, some things are sort of rustic and rough, other things are polished and smooth, but that's what you want to think about. What would the texture be for my product, for my brand? Patterns are so fun to play with, and there's a lot to do with them. They can create a feeling, a look, and they're easy to create in Illustrator. Paper texture, if you're printing letterhead, business card envelope, well, they're going to be on paper. What kind of paper? Is it recycled? Is it high gloss, shiny paper? What would it be? Graphic elements. So a lot of times your rejected logos could make another appearance as sort of a secondary graphic element. You can create borders and patterns and things out of them. So consider sort of different elements like that you could use. And then of course color, because it is color theory. Who joined us? Shamira. So explore these areas as you create these pieces. Your logo by itself is not a brand. It's just a piece of it. It's an important piece, but you can't just throw a logo on a page and say, there it is, done. You want to go beyond that. All right, here's a brand, Lucy's Fried Chicken. This was done by Pentagram, Michael Beirut. It's a beautiful word mark, really well crafted. What comes to mind when you see this logo? Homemade. That's probably a good association with fried chicken. Anything else?
But it's
I
classic.
love Lucy, yeah. So Shamira, that's an old TV show, right? Yeah, classic, old, retro, right? Why do you think retro would be a good association for a restaurant? You think people think food used to be better in the olden days? Everyone wants grandma's recipe, right? You don't want the granddaughter's recipe, you want the grandma's recipe. Yes, Shamira says yes. Yeah, I think there's a certain attitude about retro when it comes to restaurant. Made from scratch, right? You get that feeling. All right, here's the billboard. I mean the neon sign. What do you think now? What other associations are coming through? You're overthinking it, Jennifer. Go ahead, say it. Sexy, Drake says, yeah, maybe a little. This woman, this image feels very 1940s pinup from World War II to me. So a little kind of risque, but not necessarily erotic and full-on erotic or something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I'd take my kids there. It's not, I don't think it's quite like Hooters or something, but it's got an element of sort of fun, risque, right? Now, why do you think risque would be good for a fried chicken restaurant? Is fried chicken good for you?
Definitely not.
Not, right. So risque, you're kind of risque just by eating fried chicken. And it's fun and playful and all that. You don't want to, fried chicken isn't a serious decision. It's a, it's a fun thing. Here's the restaurant. So they're using this old wood texture back here to try to get that retro feeling. The typography has an old feeling to it. They've got this old engraving of a chicken for their t-shirt. So it sort of pushes that retro thing a little further. All right, here's Bone Daddy's restaurant. What do you feel when you see this?
Like spicy.
Spicy. There's something about the colors, right?
Mhm.
It's like mustard and barbecue sauce. It's got a sort of old South feeling. The artwork is sort of a primitive style that comes from the old South. One of my students today said it's like the 1920s, which I also think is valid. It's kind of old-fashioned, but you can almost smell the smoke in a way, right? The fact that this is sort of disorganized and chaotic is a benefit because it doesn't feel like a slick kind of Chili's restaurant or one of those other generic kind of restaurants. It feels a little more, as Shamira said, homemade, made from scratch. You can be too slick sometimes. This is a beer company, Swing Beer. What do you think of this?
Circus.
What comes to mind when you see it? Circus, right? Yeah, it looks very circusy. It's kind of well designed, but it doesn't necessarily fit with beer. It's kind of a weird brand. It's poorly branded, but well designed. Make sense? So sometimes you can design something that's right, that looks great, but it's not right for the brand. All right, Kate Peters Photography. What kind of photography does she do?
It's kind of hard to tell.
Exactly, it is. This is well designed, but not very branded. There's no way to know. Does she do children's photography or weddings or corporate stuff? She could do all. Maybe she does, and that's why she's not committing to like one sort of look. So let's more examples. Here's a full identity package for an architecture design firm. And this does a lot of the things right that I want you to consider. So first, the letterhead. Now, letterhead is essentially you're designing a frame for a letter. The letter goes in the middle. So don't put a lot of elements in the middle of the page. In this case, they've got the information nicely, neatly tucked away at the bottom with a little bar sort of holding line. The logo, top left, first thing you see, very important. You worked really hard on your logo. Now you're going to show it off. A little bit of info there. The back of this letterhead is flood color blue, which is kind of elegant, cool looking. This envelope logo up here, sometimes you would put the return address here. In this case, it's on the back flap of the envelope. You can also do that. The business card on the front is the logo, the person's name, and their title. And then down below is the rest of the info sort of tucked away. On the back of the card, they just use the icon. That's cool, you could do that. And this is like a note card envelope, which I think you'd have to put a sticker on it to mail it. Finkel and Williams, another architect. This is sort of an FW logo, yellow. This distinctive yellow color certainly carries through on everything. But they're also doing a sort of blind embossing of the logo, no ink, but just pressed into the paper. Again, the information's organized at the top. It doesn't have to be at the bottom, but a lot of clear space there. The envelope has the address on the flap. This is a vertical envelope, which is weird. But flood yellow with this white patch right there. The business card, they've got the full logo on one side and not on the other. That's okay, as long as it appears somewhere on the card. Here's Lucky Bucket. They got a sort of retro seal here, this wax seal element. They also created sort of a ribbon, which sort of fits with that. The back flap is this flood orange, nice. And it looks like the paper stock has a slight tint to it as well. Here is Motion 504. This is a production company out of Minneapolis, I think. And what would you say, what keywords would describe this brand? What's the look?
Rustic.
Yeah, rustic. Definitely this brown paper, simple brown paper. They're sort of North Woods because they got these stags sort of jumping. So they're pushing the Minnesota address a bit. But it's kind of, actually these elements are really, this is just a plain manila envelope, but you put the sticker on there and suddenly it becomes branded and special. Noble, Club Noble. This to me looks like cigars, right? It's got some gold foil, it's embossed. There's a lot of fancy stuff going on here. There's a little bit of a very subtle border, thick border around the letterhead with a pattern that makes it feel very elegant. So Club Noble is a maison de tolérance. I don't know what that means. A house of tolerating you. Yeah, this is a cool looking project. So this identity package design firms post this stuff on their websites all the time. This is the proof of concept that your brand works. So this is why we're doing that. Capture Studios, they're using a nice pattern on this part of the card that sort of wraps the card a little bit. Again, a distinctive color. They put the information vertical up the side. That's allowed. Different, but allowed, yeah. All right, here it's Carthage Stoneworks. What would you say about Carthage Stoneworks? What are they like?
Warehouse. I mean, that's what I'm
Yeah.
seeing.
It's not fancy, right?
No, it's to the point.
It's to the point, and it's a bit old-fashioned, right?
Hmm.
They're using this red stamp, which almost looks like an old Union logo or something. They're pushing the retro thing, I think, a bit because why? Stoneworks.
Union.
Union.
I don't know. That's
I think because the craft of stoneworking is ancient, and so people, I think, believe that it used to be done better. So old-fashioned means good. Like if you were a cell phone company, old-fashioned would be bad. But it depends on what you're selling. Here's a dentist. What are they telling you?
to take care of your teeth very brightly.
Yeah. Well, there's an attitude, right? It's a bit of fun. It's trying to be playful. They're saying funny things. The colors are bright and stand out. Shamira, innovative. Yeah, some people have a problem with the yellow when it comes to teeth. But this looks like mouthwash. I mean, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty clinical and clean. And then they have these funny statements, but written in type that looks very serious. So they're trying to disarm you from being afraid to go to the dentist. It does, Shamira. It has a retro feel. It feels like mid-century, 20th century a bit. But it doesn't feel so kind of old-fashioned-y. It feels kind of clean and bright and fun. Here's Charleston Naturally. This is for Charleston, South Carolina. So there's the letterhead and the address is at the bottom, and he put these lines here at the bottom. What do these lines look like?
Waves, almost.
Yeah, waves, like waves in the Bay of Charleston, right? But they're just simple lines in sort of different degrees of opacity. Well, and then stand them up and they almost look like seagrass. And this is a really unusual envelope because it's got the logo taking up a whole quarter of the left side. But that works because you've been putting the stamp here and the address here. He's got the return address on the back flap. The business card is die cut into this shape, and it looks like something you might find on the beach, right? And it is what we call blind embossed, so no ink, just pressed into the paper. You can simulate that in Illustrator. It's just a matter of light and shadow. A business card could have all these various things on it, but of course you wouldn't put all that. Most of them have the person's name, their title, the company name would be in the logo, and then the rest of this information sort of gathered toward the side or the bottom somewhere. Keep the typography simple. You want it to be legible. Don't do too many crazy things there. Letterhead, 8.5 by 11. Like I said, it's a frame for a letter. If you notice, there are like 3 lines on the edges here. This represents the bleed, trim, and safety. Whenever you print something, you have to have, if you go all the way to the edge, you have to go beyond where it cuts to provide a little buffer for the cutter. If it misses, there won't be a little white edge. So our template is set up with that. Envelope, stamp goes here. There's a barcode. The post office puts a barcode down here. If you put a fancy design on your envelope down here, they'll put a white sticker over it so they can print the barcode. So don't do that. The back flaps, some are pointed, some are square, and you can, like I said, you can put the return address. Some people put a sticker or something on the back. A letterhead would get the logo and the address and the phone numbers of the company. Maybe the web address, probably the web address. Envelope, logo, and the address. Those are the things you need to put on. This is the it's an illustration and separate elements is really well set up for you, linked to your presentation. So click in your presentation template and say modify original, oops, go back, and work in that document, and don't change the name and don't move it. Everything will be placed in your InDesign document already for you. You won't have to go back and replace everything. However, if you go edit original and you save it somewhere else, change the name, move it, you're going to have to relink everything. So consider that as you go forward. So as you design your color, your identity package, you're going to come up with your color palette. And I want you to think about color. So first thing you're going to do is this page of your presentation template, which is essentially exploring how your assigned color relates to other colors. This is not your color palette. This is just an experiment to explore. You may look at Pentagram and say, you know what, I like that, but I don't like this color here. I'm going to change it to something else, or I'm going to make it lighter or different. Or I'm not going to look at any of these. I'm just going to do something totally different. But this is a pretty easy thing. There's a video that shows you how to do this, to set it up and just sort of get the ball rolling, looking at colors. One thing, you know, a monochromatic palette is a legitimate palette that can work, but given that you're in color theory this month, I would steer away from that. Try to be a little more adventurous. Now's the time. Then you're going to spec out your colors, which is to identify the Pantone, the CMYK formula, and the RGB formula for each of your colors. Start at the bottom and go to the top. It's much easier because there are less colors in Pantone than there are in the other two. So do Pantone first, then CMYK, then RGB. You can create RGB colors first, and then they won't be able to be replicated in these other two. But since Pantone's the most limited, you want to start there. If you look at this color palette, there's a bit of a strategy here. So this is the assigned color, right? This is the complement, but a tint of the complement. This is a shade of the complement. This is a darker shade of the complement, and this is a shade of the original. So there's some variation in hue, variation in value, light and dark, and variation in temperature as well. You want to think about creating some contrast. If everything is the same value but different hues, it can be really harsh and sort of screaming at you. If everything is the same hue, then you've got monochromatic, and then it's harder to create more. All right, now here's the big announcement. You must have 5 colors in your palette, not 3, not 2. Your assigned color, and you are finding 4 others to make a total of 5. You can have more if you want, but 5 is requirement. You may not use all 5 colors in your logo, but you still have to come up with a 5-color palette that works together. And no black, no white. They don't count as part of your color palette. So if you have black type in your logo, that's not part of your color palette. And by the way, consider maybe not making it black. Maybe it could be something else. Big point. And every month I get people who still do it wrong. They clearly didn't watch the live session like you all are. Start with your 10 keywords. If you have keywords like bold, strong, powerful, and all this, and you have a palette that looks pastel, like Easter bunnies and stuff, then maybe you're off kilter a little bit. Consider that, and vice versa. And then think about how the colors relate to each other. Yeah, 5-color palette. These are the levers of color that you are pushing around, just like you did with your hero portrait. Hue, saturation, brightness, and temperature. Where you are on the color wheel, only one of your colors is an assigned hue. Everything else is up for grabs. Saturation, you can take a color and take it up in saturation, desaturate it so it's more white. Brightness, add some black to a color, make it a little darker. And warm and cool. Maybe you want an all warm palette because your product that is appropriate for your brand. At this moment, any questions as we're going forward that come up? We just have a lot of people joining us. Not at the minute. Shamir's okay, so I'm okay. All right. So how do you get inspiration? Look around you. Look at nature. Look at great images from great photographers. This is Annie Leibovitz. Look at fashion. The world of fashion is full of color, and you should be interested in that and pay attention. This is Tilda Swinton. The award shows. Every year I watch the award shows to see what everyone's wearing. Not because I'm so into women's clothing, but because I like to know what the color palettes are going to be like. This is from 2011 or 12. A lot of red, a lot of gold, a lot of metallics. Metallics are big. This is from 2018. Do you know why they're all wearing black? Time's up. No, seriously, time's up. That's why they were wearing it, because of the time's up movement. But it's Hollywood, so there's still some bling, right? This is 2019 Golden Globes. Color is back. Some deep, rich colors, right? And of course, star of the show, Lady Gaga. I swear her team, they came up with this color because of the contrast to the red carpet. It really was powerful. I mean, it just was an amazing color when she wore that. So think about that. Oh, great artist. Matisse, who was an impressionist, loved color. He said, when I put colors together, they have to join a living chord, like a musical chord or harmony. And he was a prolific artist who loved color, lived in the Mediterranean area for some time, bright colors and amazing work throughout his life. And in contrast, this is a painting by Andrew Wyeth, not Jamie. Jamie is his son. Christina's World from 1948. Have you ever seen this painting before? Anybody?
Yes.
It's kind of a famous painting. Yeah. One of the things that's usually used for is an example of dynamic composition. Yeah, Shamira, maybe in Graphic Principles. This high horizon line, the figure sort of pointing to the farmhouse. It's very dynamic composition, but I want you to look at this winter grass. So it's kind of dull gray grass, right? Except not really. If you look, there's this undulating through here. This is painted on wooden board and he scratched into the surface to make the grass. But even though it conveys that sort of winter grass look, there's still so much rich color in here. This is a painting by Albrecht Bierstadt, who was a German immigrant, came to the American West and did these amazing paintings. They're like 15 feet tall. He was part of what they call the Hudson River School, which did these amazing sort of luminance, you know, the sun sort of beaming through the canvas. If you imagine in the days before electric light, people thought these were magical paintings, like they just sort of glowed, had that look. But beyond that, they made people really want to go out west. This was in the 1850s, and so a lot of people got in the Conestoga wagon and headed west. Here's the domes of Yosemite. Again, this sort of, you just feel the atmospheric perspective. There's green in the clouds. There must be a big storm coming. You've all seen that when it's a terrible storm and the sky turns green, you get really freaked out. Gauguin, a French impressionist who, at the age of 40, he was a bank teller, and his father wanted him to go to law school and considered him a failure. And one day he said, I'm going to be a painter, and he moved to Tahiti. This painting, you see these women sitting on this decking, these wooden boards, but the wood has so much color, bounce light and pink and turquoise and violet, a little bit of blue, orange, the foot detailed so well with this bounce light of green and stuff. Just full of color, really sort of exaggerating a bit of the color that is all around us. Here's another one by Gauguin. All right, so what can you do for inspiration? One thing that you should be doing all the time is looking at color in movies, on TV and video games, looking at it in the store. It's all around us, and sort of noticing what people are doing. If you're working on your project for this month, you'll be looking at competitors and what are they doing in the same space. Let's see, yes, okay. Kind of went over some of this. All right, hierarchy in design. We usually think of that as being the thing that is the biggest on the page, but in color, hierarchy can mean the smallest thing. You can create a focal point, create direction and meaning, create some drama and impact. Experiment. Don't just do one color palette. Do many. Experiment, play around. That's why I'm saying only spec out your colors once you're done, because you should be playing around, and it's a pain to spec out the colors, believe me, I know. Here's another piece by Jessica Heish. So if this was a triadic color relationship, it would be orange, purple, and green, but instead she uses this bright blue, and somehow it works really cool, really well. Another one by her, this could be a triadic red, yellow, blue, but instead of yellow, it's this green color. And again, it gives us this great feeling. Interesting, a little off from normal. Yes, Shamira, take pictures too, all the time. In fact, you should create a folder. I'll just tell you all this now. You should create a folder with your name and the word stock for stock photo. And what you should do is every time you take a photo, you see something, clouds, texture, plants, something, take a picture of it, store it in that folder. And then when you work on a project, you can dive in and use these photos as either inspiration or parts of your design. Since it's so easy to take pictures. Matilda, the musical. So Matilda went to this terrible school, sort of represented this chalkboard background, very dark, but then the colors are her magic sort of splashing around in front. Colors can be used to organize things by variety, by flavor, different varieties of wine here. We go back here. So these, you know what flavor these are, even if you couldn't read, right? But the design is super consistent throughout each label, right? The position and size, the typography, everything's very consistent. And then they're able to really create some variety with color. If both the color and the design changed each time, it wouldn't feel like a brand anymore. But you can play with color a lot if you keep that sort of consistent design. Same thing here with this little gold logo. This is coffee beans. So they're using black as sort of a unifying thing, but first Pantones, then CMYK, then RGB. Just remember that. This one last piece by Jessica Heish. I love this gradient because these are basically complementary colors. And if you've ever mixed complementary colors in paint, it turns to mud. But this is carefully done so that it doesn't. It sort of has a glow, especially here. It looks like a warm light hitting this blue surface. Really well done gradient. And that's comes down to being really good at Illustrator. Yes, we said this. All right, hue, saturation, brightness, temperature. All right, that is my lecture. It's intended to provide inspiration, direction. The assignment itself has instructions on how to do everything. The two things work together to get you through this week. So there's your page from your template. This is a video that shows you how to do that. The identity package, this is the what the template looks like. There's a video that shows you how to use the template. And then there's the page in your presentation template with this. And then there's how to spec your colors, little video too. So each task comes with its own little video. But as I said, these are more just sort of technical instructions. They're not inspiration. Inspiration comes from you as a designer figuring out what you want to do, looking at your brand, being creative, and then posting your stuff to the discussion and getting some feedback and looking at everyone else's work. And hopefully that will spiral you upward toward better work. Any questions?
Not yet. I will definitely have them though.
No? All right, that's fine. And you know how to get in touch with me.
Yes.
I'm going to show you a student example. This is an online student from 2 months ago. Bermuda Tea. And apologies if you have Bermuda Tea as your brand, but the creative brief, very traditional English tea. So there's her word cloud, really well done design. I think it could be a little bigger on the page, but it looks good. Our target audience, inspiration, competitors, fonts, sketches. So there's 12. She took them in. This is what you just completed this past week. Adding logo type, playing with the icons, creating different versions of the icon, logo type icon. In this case, she was sort of doing a heraldry thing, which worked. And then she put it in the logo test. Now, when you do this, use this template, which you just did, it sort of gives you an idea. Does it work? I see it. Does it look distinctive? And when I looked at this, I said, number 3 is the winner. So there it is. And then she experimented with color a little here. There's her color logo. So there's sort of a gold here, a deep, rich red that is a low, like brightness is way down, and then this pastel color, which is actually her assigned color. So she created some wonderful contrast in the color palette. There it is. So her assigned color had a high value, very kind of pale. She created a couple of deep, rich colors and then a gold representing gold, royalty flat. So the palette works really well, and boy, does it look nice on cards. She actually created sort of a gold foil effect, which is possible. You can get an image of gold, a metallic gold, and do a mask, and you can do that if you want. She did it really well. Letterhead, a very nice border. It's kind of traditional border because it's a very traditional product. Borders are usually kind of out of fashion now, but this works for this product. Letterhead, and playing with that pattern on the envelope really nicely. And she, withheld the color on this logo on the envelope, and it worked. There's the identity package mockup, which is a Photoshop file. You're going to build this out. It's really easy to use, and I believe there's a video about it. If there isn't, I'll make sure it is. That's what you're doing this week. All right. All right, guys, this is going to be an early night. I hope you feel inspired, and I can't wait to see your work.